Welcome to Spanglish Friends, the podcast for true beginner Spanish learners.
Hola amigos, I'm Val, your co-host and experienced Spanish teacher from Venezuela.
And I'm Em, your Australian co-host who's been learning Spanish for 10 years.
Our goal is simple, to get you confident listening and speaking in beginner Spanish with content you'll actually use in real-life conversations.
Join the Spanish Friends community by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts and following us on social media at Spanglish_Friends. Let's get started.
Comencemos. Hola, hola amigos. Hi Spanglish friends.
Hello, and welcome to the first official episode of the podcast.
Yes, we are so very excited to finally be recording our first episode, which has been a long time in the making.
It really has. I am so very emocionada, so excited. Today's episode is going to be your introduction to the Spanish Friends community. You're going to learn a bit about your host Val and myself Em and our language learning journeys. You're going to be able to find out if this is the right Spanish learning podcast for your level and goals that you have. And finally, we're going to go over what you can expect in each episode and how our learning methodology is custom designed to set you up for success as a beginner.
Exactly. Awesome, Em. Well, let's jump straight into it. So first, let's share a little bit about ourselves. What do you think?
Absolutely. You go for it.
My name is Valentina. I was born in Venezuela, but I live currently in Chile. I've been learning English now for 4 years. And honestly, it's been one of the best decisions I ever made. However, it didn't feel like this in the beginning. As many students, I used to struggle to remember new vocabulary or how to write a word in comparison with how it is spoken, which I'm still struggling with from time to time. But it's way better than before.
It really is. You're improving every day, just like our Spanish students are.
Thank you. Also, as it was my first foreign language, I needed to get adapted to everything, basically. To the different grammar structure, to the phrases that would make sense to say in English, but in Spanish it didn't, or vice versa. Something completely new for me, and because of it, I felt overwhelmed in many cases. But after
Definitely feel that.
But after a while, when I started to push myself out of my comfort zone and dare to speak with others, I found it very interesting and engaging, like, okay, I think I got it.
I got this. Exactly.
So that was the moment when I started enjoying it through connecting with people from very different cultures. My main goal to learn English was to be able to communicate with people all around the world, since I wanted to travel abroad as soon as I had the opportunity. But it was in that year when I started my teaching journey, and I realized that my lessons could become more useful if I knew a second language, so I could translate to my students if needed. So that became like a bigger purpose besides traveling, and it really paid off. As I kept learning, I delivered better classes to my students. Now I've been a Spanish teacher for over 4 years.
It's such an amazing story about, and I always love listening to your journey today. It is so inspiring. So I'm Em. I was born and raised in Australia, a native English speaker. Now I've been learning Spanish for 10 years, and it's been quite the journey. I was honestly someone who thought they would never learn a second language. Honestly, I almost failed my high school French lessons so poorly. It was only after I finished high school and started going to university that I did my big first trip overseas to Chile for a month to visit my half-sister and my nephew that were actually both born and lived overseas in Chile. My nephew was 1 year old at the time. I realized coming back from that trip that I wanted a relationship with him. He wasn't
so
going
cute.
to. I know. He is so cute. He wasn't going to know how to speak English semi-fluently for another 12 to 15 years, right? When he became a teenager in school. So I decided I want to learn Spanish to be able to speak to him. And so in the summer of my second year of university, outside of my degree, I enrolled in night school classes for Spanish, and thus began my Spanish journey. I've been taking class once a week ever since, through physical Spanish schools and online tutoring with my Professor Val.
You see, now
And
your Spanish is amazing.
absolutely. And it's been a wild journey. Last year in 2024, I spent 6 months traveling around South America, which
Wow.
really took my Spanish to that next level, as I started spending whole days touring around and just speaking in Spanish. And now I've always felt a pull to help people just like myself, native English speakers who never thought they could learn another language. I felt this want to be able to tell them that it is possible and give them the tools to be able to do so. So that's a bit about my language learning journey.
I always love hearing your story, Em. And
Thanks, Val.
actually, that trip you did last year around South America, that's how we actually met.
It is how we met.
I became Em's Spanish teacher, and now we are really best friends.
We really are.
We got talking this past year about my beginner students and how lots of them have been asking me if I can recommend a good Through Beginners podcast to start practicing listening in their free time. However, when I was researching, we realized that there was not a podcast currently available that was for Through Beginners and the basic levels. Most podcasters started jumping into Spanish really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely, Val. I noticed when I was early on in my Spanish studies that there are many podcasts aimed at intermediate learners. So they just start speaking in very rapid fire Spanish. But that means that true beginners, people who are just picking up Spanish, they're not able to find the right level of listening practice for them. And they're probably getting disheartened because of this, and they probably think, well, I'll never be able to listen or speak in Spanish. I certainly felt that way. And because of this, you and I concluded one thing, is that our students, our community, we shouldn't have to wait any longer to practice our Spanish listening and speaking skills. We should be able to start now.
That's right. Yeah. So who is our podcast designed for, Em?
Yeah, so our podcast, Spanglish Friends, is really for young adult to adult Spanish learners who are true beginners. We're talking, you've walked up the street and you haven't spoken a word of Spanish in your life. This is our podcast. If you want to get technical about it, you might have heard about the Common European Framework for Languages. This is a reference framework where we describe what different language level people have. So if you want to get technical, we're aiming at people who have an A1 to A2 level of Spanish. You're going to hear probably about this framework a lot in books and publications if you're just starting out on your Spanish speaking journey.
Yes, good suggestion, Em. So, for example, this podcast might be right for you if you are someone who wants to travel and learn the basics of Spanish to get around. Someone who maybe learned a bit of Spanish back in school and now wants to revisit in advance. Someone who is just starting out to speak to their family in Spanish and wants to ease into things. Or someone who may need to start learning the basics of Spanish for work. And likely many more people.
Absolutely. So there might be many different people that tune into our podcast, but the key thing is that you are a beginner Spanish learner. We're here for you, jumping in English to support. So now you know a little bit about your hosts, who this podcast is for. Now, we want to make a promise to you. Okay, you're investing your time in listening to us, probably during your busy days. Maybe you're driving home from work, currently on public transport. Maybe you're cooking, maybe you're on a plane, maybe you're relaxing on a beach, who knows, all around the world, right? But we want you to know what you're going to be able to get out of our podcast and how the Spanglish Friends community is going to help take your español to the próximo nivel, to that next level.
Certainly. Yes. So we are committing and making 3 promises to you and hold us to them.
Hold us to them. Absolutely.
Our first promise is that Spanglish Friends is a podcast that will be for true beginners. And that's one of the awesome things. We are a student-teacher podcast, the only that currently exists. You'll hear my native Spanish speaking and also get explanations that actually make sense in English from Emmy, complemented by my understanding of Spanish grammar.
Yes. And plus, one of the most important things you need to do as a beginner is make mistakes and build confidence in making mistakes, as this is when your language learning actually starts to progress. So I'm sure you'll hear me make mistakes many times. Maybe sometimes you'll hear Val make mistakes in English, but that's okay, because you know what? We're all learning, and hopefully via secondhand embarrassment, you can help your language learning journey by learning what we did wrong and not making those mistakes yourself.
Oh no, like, your Spanish is very, very good. You're so good. I know you'll make many.
It depends on the day. It really depends on the day.
But yes, like, in case, I'm sure Emmy will do the same with my English also from time to time. We are still learning and we never stop learning.
Yeah, that's right. So that's promise number 1, to be for true beginners. Promise number 2 is to help you get exposure to listening to conversations that you would actually hear in real life, okay? Not just stuff written in a textbook, whilst actually helping you to remember what you've learned. So each podcast will introduce the topic of the day, give you an overview of the Spanish you need to know in English, and then actually have a conversation in slow, and I'm talking super slow Spanish. We'll keep it bite-sized while still challenging you. We're aiming for that nice Goldilocks zone where we're recapping what you know, building on previous episodes, while stretching you a tiny bit episode by episode.
That's right. And after each conversation, we will break it down, discuss the type of words used, phrases used, and share any cool tips and tricks we have. And we know, like, the human brain can be kind of like a goldfish.
We
only can retain so much information at a time.
I am so like this. In the past, when I've listened to a 30-minute long or hour-long Spanish podcast, the next day I'm like, I can't actually remember anything that I've learned at all.
That has happened to me too. Exactly. So that's why at the end of each podcast, we are going to leave you with 3 things to remember. No more and no less than 3 things. This may be a word, a phrase, a sentence structure, grammatical concept, or just a fun slang word.
Yes, and this is honestly one of the bits I'm so excited about with Spanglish Friends, and something that I wish I had as a beginner, right? We're going to help you put this into practice too. So we've given you 3 things to remember. You'll have the opportunity then each podcast to participate in the Reto of the week. Reto is a Spanish word which means challenge. You can head to the comments section to get involved in the Spanish Friends community and share what you've learned and test or show off your newfound knowledge using these 3 concepts of the week.
Amazing. And our final promise to you, amigo, is promise number 3. You won't be just listening to a podcast. You are going to be joining a community, a group of Spanglish-speaking friends, all in their similar language learning journeys from all around the world. A space where you can feel the support of these friends and feel like you are making actually progress towards your learning goals.
Absolutely. In a bit of Spanglish too, a bit of Spanish and a bit of English. We want to help acknowledge each podcast as well, those who are ticking goals on their language learning journeys, because no one turns around to you one day and says, oh, congrats, like you can now speak Spanish. There's no magic day where it's like, ding, finally you speak Spanish, right?
Yeah.
So it's really about celebrating all these little milestones along the way. Like, wow, I had one conversation today where I used this one new concept that I learnt. I used one new word, or I managed to figure out this verb that was really confusing me. I remember this morning I was speaking to Val and finally something was clicking in my head. I'm like, oh, I just wanted to be able to do this the whole time. And finally now I'm doing it. These are things we want to celebrate on the podcast.
I agree with you, totally. And we are going to be doing this by shouting out listeners every podcast in our Go Amigos shout out.
Woohoo!
So,
Woohoo!
if you have achieved something amazing this week, head to the comments. We would love to be able to recognize you and celebrate with your new group of Spanish friends.
Absolutely. And that is our reto of this week, right? So head to the comments section and either introduce yourself to the community or tell us your goals that you have for your Spanish learning journey. Tell us something amazing maybe you've achieved this week. Maybe it's just listening to today's podcast is your first step in your language learning journey. So head to the comments. That is our reto today. This is so exciting, Val. Bueno, amigos, now you have the full chisme, the full gossip, the full
chisme
loadout. You will definitely hear us saying chisme a lot throughout this podcast.
That's true.
That is our thing, to chisme out, which means to gossip, to chat. You've got the full chisme now.
Yeah, probably you will hear me and Emmy talking about chisme. That's the gossip, or tea in Spanish.
Absolutely. And we make no apologies in advance for the endless fun we're going to have on this podcast. We're new to this and we'll make mistakes along the way, but we're definitely going to have fun doing it.
Definitely. In our next episode, we are going to jump into a really awesome topic prior to actually jumping into our first Spanish lesson.
Oh, what's that, Val? Tell us, what are we doing next episode?
There, we are going to share what are the proven ways for beginners to be able to start listening well and speaking well in Spanish. So stay tuned to episode 2, episodio 2, coming soon.
Oh, I can't wait. Thank you all so much again for tuning into episode 1 and becoming part of the Spanglish Friends community. I'm really looking forward to you all joining us again next time. Ciao, amigos.
Thank you so much. Hasta la próxima. Until next time, my friends.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Spanglish Friends. We are both so proud of the time you're investing to level up your Spanish listening and speaking skills.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, follow us and give the show a rating wherever you listen to podcasts. Or even better, tell a friend about the show. It's how we can help even more people on their Spanish learning journeys and continue to grow our awesome, supportive community.
Don't forget to check out our socials, including Instagram and TikTok at Spanglish_Friends for even more beginner Spanish fun.
Congratulations on taking another step today towards your Spanish learning goals. Ciao, Spanglish amigos. Until next time.
Hasta la próxima, amigos.